What's happening, fam? L.A.R movement still moving, right? Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and Create Space. A link will be in the description box below, as usual. This video is entitled Words from Generation X to the Millennials. When I talk to people who are millennials, I get where they're coming from to a degree, because I can see when I was their age and how I would interact with the generation above me, the baby boomer generation. And sometimes I'm going to say the things that I've learned from being young and figuring that I had it all figured out, to being older and saying, some things I was right about and some things I was wrong about, right? When it comes to the generational gap in mentality, you got groups of people saying, y'all are too old. Y'all don't understand what's going on nowadays. And that's true. Like, generations and how they come up are different. So you can't relate old fads to new fads. But when you go past that, the older generation is trying to tell you principles never change. The age may change. The generation may go from baby boomer to Gen X or to millennial, but the principles in certain situations never change. And it really doesn't matter how you feel about it, or if you think your generation is different. If you do dirt, you get dirt. That's the principle. You work hard, you're going to get ahead. That's the principle, in a general sense. So there's no getting around principles, right? So when somebody who's older tells you, look, it's like this, and this. Same thing when it came talking to like stances that you might feel is a hard stance because you're young and you feel like you're a right fighter, and certain things don't look right when people do it. But in actuality, they are right, or they look a little too harsh, and you wouldn't do that. And it's because of your youth and inexperience. You're not taking into consideration that self-preservation is the law of the land. Sometimes you can't just go out sacrificing yourself, thinking that people are going to sacrifice themselves for you as a sign of reciprocity, when that's not the case. There are more snakes in the world than there are eagles. I say it like that. So when people are trying to impart things to you, understand that some people are looking down on a generation, because when you go from one generation to the next, you hear the generation below you struggle. And like when I hear millennials talk about their struggles as millennials, I laugh and I think they're soft and weak-minded at times, because I'm like, that's it. Man, when I was your age, I had this, and this, and then it's like, but I could say the same thing about when I was younger, and I would talk to my parents or my grandparents about, my struggles as a teenager, a young adult, and they'd be like, that's it. And they would say, well, when I was that age, I had this, and this, and I'm like, because whether people like to admit it or not, even if it's the generation that lives now, usually has it better than the generation that came before them. So you got to be careful who you're talking to, because at times you'll be surprised at the things that people had to go through that you would say, oh, I just couldn't. I don't know how you did it. You did it because you have to. You had to. There was no getting around that. Um, y'all gonna do things differently. Y'all gonna look at entertainment differently, but you guys are gonna gravitate to different things. And the one thing I'm glad I learned early, there's a big difference between what's classic and what's trendy. And millennials do this, and I remember people in Gen X who would do this. You would hook yourself to a fad and wouldn't listen to the generation above you. Say, look, that's not gonna be a good look for you. Don't do something because everybody else is doing it and it's fad right now. Because when it goes out of style, it might just be a mark of how stupid you are. You're like, yeah, what are you talking about? You can tell the age group people are in by their tattoos nowadays. It ain't just the ink, or if it's faded or not, by the location and the style, because basically everybody has the same thing, or they tattoo in the same area. So you know where they're coming from. And the problem with that is it's really not genuine and sincere. It's just a bunch of people on a fan of being on the bandwagon of a fad. So when that fad is over and you're left with the residuals, it's like, I regret that. And that's what sometimes generations try to tell you to not do. Same thing, the problem that I remember having with baby boomers was they were dysfunctional. And they taught me dysfunction. And they were either mad at me when I didn't want to continue on with the dysfunction because we weren't on the same page, or they were mad that I took the dysfunction to another level. It's like, but I'm only this messed up. You want to be all the way. What's your problem? Because what older generations don't want to grasp, whether it's a selective memory or whatever, is that whatever normalcy you lived in when the generation under you was coming up, that's their normal. You might have gotten away from something that's dysfunctional and still been working your way out of it. But even if you're working your way out of dysfunction, that's the people under you's norm. So now, when they come up, you're like, I don't understand how you came up like that, because just like my parents' generation, that selective memory and forgetful, like, I don't understand why you can have this demeanor or this aspect of your personality, or how you can be this harsh or this aggressive. I just don't get it. And it's like, do you not remember how I came up? Because they remember their evolution. They don't remember the norm that I was birthed in and raised in, right? So I get that too. The one thing I will say is, but when people are trying to give you useful, pertinent information, what you shouldn't do is dismiss it because, I'm young and I'm invincible and it's different for me, because, like I said earlier, older generations are telling you principles. They're not telling you things that's going to just come and go, right? And, because it's different now, because I've made this reference before. I have a photo album, right? Got like people passed on, grandparents, great grandparents, stuff like that. And when you look back and you see people had to take out their free spirited days because out of the photo albums, because it's like they were embarrassed about how they looked because they didn't listen to what was going on, right? So you got to look at yourself, even in your social media, and people take these pictures and posts, and you got to realize that, take a good look at yourself, because if you don't pay attention to how you look, how you evolve, or are you stagnant, So when people are talking from an older generation to a younger generation, a lot of times they're trying to tell you not to do so much to make a fool of yourself, because A lot of times when you're young and foolish, you don't realize how foolish it looks because you're young and everybody in your age is inexperienced and they making mistakes. But it looks foolish to you when you see somebody who you should feel like is too old to be so foolish and making those mistakes. But the problem is those older people are trying to tell you you're going to be that old just like that. So don't keep putting off growing up and having higher standards because you'll wind up like these people that you're making fun of, like, how are they so messed up at this age? They should have it all together. That can be you. And when you say, oh, no, I can't, people are trying to tell you, yes, it can, because that's what they were saying. And 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 that's why, the holidays and Thanksgiving table and Christmas table looks a little like a hodgepodge of decisions. So, from Generation X to the Millennials, this is my word to y'all. This is what I've seen, what I've dealt with, what I've experienced, what I've observed, and hopefully you listen and take some of these things into consideration. We out.